Welcome everyone to the World Health Network International Call. Really glad you could make it today. Today we have a special guest, Debashish here representing CovidMeetups.com. We're so excited about this collaboration and taking on this social network where folks can meet each other and work together to have safe community. So Deb, if you'd like to start, you
Sure.
could
No,
speak a
no
little bit
problem.
about the network that you and your wife Emily created.
Sure. So my name is Debashish Shaw, and I go by Deb just to make life easier for everyone. And this idea was actually my wife's, and unfortunately Emily Shaw. And unfortunately, we split childcare during the day because of the circumstances that we're in. And now is bedtime, and hopefully, our 3-year-old daughter will go to sleep, and then Emily will be able to join us at some point during this call. But if she's not around, then I'll be happy to kind of answer questions and where this came from. So just a little bit of personal background about myself and my wife and kind of how we got into this. So we met in Hong Kong almost 9 years ago, and we were both graduate students at the University of Hong Kong, and we were doing a course that kind of combined software development programming with a little bit of business focused on IT. And we're based here in Switzerland. We've been living here now almost for 5 years. Emily runs a business called docfly.com, which is a online PDF editing solution. And she actually runs that essentially herself. So she's a solo developer, and that's quite a nice software as a service business. As you know, because of the pandemic, and even before that, a lot of documents are going online. And so instead of editing your documents by buying Adobe, you do it in the browser. And that's her business. And for me personally, I was actually in the process of setting up a small investment firm based on quantitative investments. And essentially the background to this was, we've been waiting for a long time to have some kind of sensible response to this pandemic, better mitigations, all the stuff that you guys already know that I won't repeat, things like ventilation and better mask wearing and trying to get numbers down, things like that. And we've been waiting very patiently for a long time, and these things just aren't happening, right? And we have a 3-year-old today, and when she was younger, this was less of a concern because, as you may or may not know, in the first few years, it's really all about the immediate caretakers. And as you get older, there's a concern that children need to socialize and need to play with others. And it's very difficult to do that when almost everyone around you is told that this is a flu-like mild disease and there's just not much to it. My wife and I, we were talking about this before the call, really started following a few scientists, Yanir himself, individuals like Andrew Ewing, who was on a call yesterday, and someone who I think would be great for your network to give a talk, Dr. Anthony Leonardi, who has been remarkably correct about immunity and how much damage you get from repeated sustained COVID infections. So essentially nothing was happening. The most logical solution here, and I actually personally grew up in China, so I was in Beijing for SARS-1. And I've seen kind of let's say a government collective response that moves very urgently in response to like a serious pandemic, and that's the kind of response that works. I know there's a lot of issues and in sort of the things that they do, in a modern democracy, but that's kind of, I thought we would kind of see a democratic adaptation of that. It never happened. Here in Switzerland, the population, the country here has aspects of direct democracy. The population actually voted on, do we want COVID measures? Like, do we want more money towards this? Do we want, vaccination passes, things like that? And some of those, aspects are very controversial. Switzerland's not a left-wing country. And that actually went through with 60% of the vote saying, yes, we want more measures and coronavirus protections. Those have, as of a few days ago, been, almost entirely removed. So there's almost nothing here, just like in the rest of the Western world. And in almost every country, you see polling data. So I'm just echoing here what Yanir told me. and this is of course true, you see polling data that's very supportive of measures. So what do you do, right? So we're in a, I read this somewhere on Twitter, I thought it was a neat way to say it. We're in a permademic. The immunity, from what I can tell, not as a scientist, but just anecdotally and certainly based on some very smart individuals who I follow, would appear to be waning. So any infections, natural immunity is certainly not something you can bank on. And in our case, Emily and I, we have young children. So continuous sustained isolation is not ideal. This is a very difficult problem for us to solve in our personal social network. So some friends, I mean, they're out there doing stuff and they're like, oh, this is nothing. And I sort of smile and we don't talk about that. And then, to try and save the friendship. And for others, I mean, it's sad, but they just don't have a choice, right? It's like they work as teachers or they have some kind of office job where they have to be facing people, with or without masks, and that just is life for them. So the last thing I'm going to do is talk about, all the terrible things that happen or may happen if you are continuously reinfected. It's just not fair on them. So what ends up happening is you just, you see, and someone very astutely said this, that, from the beginning of the pandemic, our social capital, as in our wealth socially, has decreased dramatically, right? We're a lot poorer in terms of our friendships and our relationships, and certainly just the sheer amount of animosity and arguments and fighting that goes on in public venues like Twitter and Facebook. It's really, really nasty, right? Like the sheer amount of debate. Well, I wouldn't even call it debate, just outright arguing and fighting. So, what do you do? And there are some real issues here, which is, at least here in Switzerland, and I think this is true almost in every Western country, that even if you were to meet someone, and then you both agreed to wearing masks, you're just subject to a huge amount of ridicule. And a lot of that is just coming from a place of like, oh, you remind me that things are normal and I'm therefore going to attack you, right? And it's just human nature and there's nothing one can do about it. So one of the ways that we have dealt with this emotionally was in fact trying to find on social networks, existing social networks, so Twitter, Facebook, are there any groups of parents who are talking about this? And I was just telling Kimberly and Katie before the call, there's a great one on Facebook called Still COVIDing Parents Edition. And if you go to any, and it turns out Facebook is kind of big for this. So if you go to any city in the world, Stockholm, Boston, New York, and then you type in, your city plus parents, there'll be like a Boston Parents Association, a Stockholm Parents Association. And you see people kind of chatting, or a group, I should say, not an association. You see people kind of chatting about, like, oh, what's a good daycare, or like, what's this, what's that. And if you bring up, the C word, then you are either booted off, your post is deleted, or the same kind of fight that you see going on Twitter and Facebook then gets on Twitter gets replicated inside Facebook, where a bunch of people think, oh, it's nuts. Like, why would you have any concerns? And it's just it's unpleasant. But funnily enough, in the Still COVIDing Parents Edition group, it's everyone sort of agrees that COVID is not a cold, and it's quite nice because you can kind of freely speak your mind. And you can finally, address these concerns and say, gosh, like this happened to me yesterday. What do you guys think? And people agree, say, oh, it's terrible, blah, blah, blah. And it's just nice to be kind of in a place where people agree that, it's a big deal. And what was really obvious in this group is that nobody could find each other. So you would see people in Boston, you'd see people in New York, you'd see people in, Philadelphia. And then just because of the timeline, it was very difficult for them to connect. And one idea that actually my wife had said, because she's a software developer, and said, what we really need is at a very basic level is a basic shared spreadsheet that everyone can essentially log into this spreadsheet if they care about COVID. And they can immediately find each other, they can find other families, they can find, and then this is, sort of to be discussed in the future, they can find businesses that, that are taking precautions, keeping things safe, dentists, chiropractors, things like that. And that was really the idea. And the initial pain for us, and then we assumed that more and more people will face this is kids, right? It's like, can we find a way to meet up outside with another family who's taking precautions and kind of allow our children to play with each other? So that's a problem that we're trying to solve. It's very difficult to solve it at an individual level. So we thought it made more sense, if we solve it for us here in Switzerland, then we've also solved this problem now, hopefully for thousands of families around the world. The application is now, and the domain is owned by the New England Complex Science Institute, so that's Yanir's institute. And then I actually personally reached out to Yanir because we wanted to have this under some kind of organization. And we kind of debated setting up a foundation ourselves, but it's very complicated. It's a lot of paperwork. And our goal here isn't, to own this or to say like, hey, look, we did it. It's actually to have a successful network and really to be a kind of a public utility for the world, right? So hopefully when you have a bunch of people around you who care about COVID, who are willing to meet up safely, et cetera, that's a resource for everyone and we're all better off as a result. So that's essentially it. The last thing I'll say on that is that it's quite a simple application. It's not particularly complicated. We can go through it very quickly. I'll just give you some quick statistics. So that we just crossed 500 users today. And we have between 3 and 10 users in every major US city. To answer a previous question, between, I'd say probably at this point, 50% of new users are coming from Twitter, the other 50 from Facebook. So I'll give you a rundown of all the countries where we have numbers. So Canada, Portugal, Singapore, Czechia, the United States, by far our largest market, France, Italy, the United Kingdom, Australia, Sweden, Greece, Switzerland, unfortunately that's my wife and I, Belgium, and Germany. And as I was saying, early traction has been really straightforward. There are people who have been, these are sad stories. I mean, there have been vulnerable families with relatively older kids, 6, 8, 10, 12 years old, who have now been in social isolation for 2 years. I mean, they barely left their house. You have either the child or the parents or the grandparents who are vulnerable, and that kind of forces everyone to reduce their risks. These people they're crying out for some kind of solution like this, and are, when you reach them, they're a very easy kind of target to convert into a user. And then now, especially as all the mitigations get removed, people's ability to take risk decreases, and something like this becomes a lot more attractive. And one thing I'll just say, and I'm coming up to 15 minutes here, so I'll try and finish this, is that it doesn't seem intuitive, but when you have an initial group of kind of, let's say, super fans, or like let's say 100 users who really are dying for your service, it seems like nothing, but that's all you need to have a successful either business or social service, which is what this is in this case. And if you can meet the needs of that group and you can reach out to them, above them will be people who maybe aren't clinically vulnerable, but they've had one COVID infection and they're like, okay, that's enough for me, right? I don't want another one. There's another group of people who are simply risk averse, or just very informed about this, people like me. And then there's kind of a huge group in the middle that's reads like the kind of mainstream media, doesn't think it's cold and doesn't really know what to do either. So as you kind of meet people's needs on an escalating scale, you get more and more and more users. So the key today, as I said, today it's quite simple. There are people who are crying out for this. And as you become a bigger and bigger network and community, and you add businesses, you add, not just families, but individuals, you host events, kind of like this one, you can really make a big impact cumulatively over time. So that's about all I have to say. And I'm happy to take questions at this point.
Thank you so much. That was really informative. Enjoyed the backstory, especially. I'll open it up to the group. I think it might be great to do a screen share of the application itself. If folks are curious, but I'll go ahead and open.
Right. So this is New York as an example. So this will be kind of easily the largest network, which should not maybe be a huge surprise to anyone. So as you can see, the way we have it set up today, and we do need to make it a bit more inclusive to individuals and not merely families with children, but you'll see individuals here saying, we have a 4-year-old, we have a 5-year-old, we have a 4-year-old, this is New Jersey, and, we'd love to meet similar families masked outdoors, when the weather's better, or, we wear N95s only, my son is shy, looking for friends. And as you add more and more people, the network becomes more and more valuable. So this is really, this is essentially it. And when you set up your own profile, so this is my profile, I changed my location to New York, just to show you the network. You can go in here, you can add children to your own profile, and then you can try to honestly answer some questions about what precautions you take. And then here, in my blurb, I just wrote, I'm looking to meet like-minded parents in the Zug, Zurich, Lucerne area here in Switzerland. And it's a very, very simple application. Then here's a message I sent, to my wife as a test saying, hey, test message. And you can also share some of your contact details with that individual. So, that's essentially all there is in the application. So I'll stop sharing, and hopefully that's relatively clear to everyone.
Well, thank you. There was a question in the chat from Wendy. She was asking if it is an application just for parent users.
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we have written on the site is very oriented towards families and parents. We need to do a better job of updating the content that explains that there's also a huge community, sadly, of long haulers, disabled, etc., who are looking for connections in their local area. And one of the things that I've been discussing with Yanir is making the messaging more obvious that it doesn't just have to be an in-person play date for a child; it can also be an online meetup. So, for example, like an OHEY event, OEA event, or a Zoom call or something like that. So yes, we just need to update the site to make that more clear.
What's the name of the app, Deb?
Oh, sorry, it's CovidMeetups.com.
I think it would be a great idea, because I do think that a lot of us, yay as well, one of the reasons we do meet up every week, because we know that we are quite isolated with our concerns and our worries, and it's just a great way to be able to, meet other like-minded people. And we are very far away from one another, and we're not.
And again, the polls are saying there are a lot of us, but the ability to see them is much more limited, because the people who are not following precautions, they're the ones who are out and about, and that makes it hard for
us. May I say a few words?
Sure.
To Deb? That I'm a mother of a 9-year-old or almost 10-year-old daughter, and exactly as you said, your initiative and everything you said is so very accurate. I'm the way you are, not vulnerable, but just I have too much knowledge, and when it comes to health, too risk averse. I'm not normally and generally risk averse when it comes to other things, but health is something I don't play with, and I don't play Russian roulette with my health, and also very much pro-eco and etc. So for me, all this other solutions are really not very viable, like 6 boosters just to be able to feel relatively safe. It's like not my way of living. So I have been isolated for 2 years almost, and I'm a very social person, and so is my daughter. And now I face myself hearing her cry every day because she was not allowed to continue in her normal school online any longer. So she has a new online school in the States, and she's crying every day that it's the worst school in the world, that she doesn't want to be there because she cannot meet her friends. So this initiative is very, very welcome. And I have lost almost all my friends, and I talk only to 2 people or 3 in my family, because everybody just keeps asking me, how long can you go on like this? How can I know how long? I mean, it's not my fault that the world, exactly as you're saying accurately, is not doing what they should be doing or what it should be doing. I was in Spain when it started, and we managed to get it down to almost nothing. And then they reopened and just messed up everything. I was writing to the ministry. I was fighting for it, but there was nothing I could do. As a person, like you're saying, as a person, there's nothing you can do. And one feels so helpless. We, with 1 year, we had our message, because I'm also based in Poland now. We had the prime minister get the message how to end the pandemic. He didn't care. So as a person, there's only so much you can do, which is basically very little to change the situation. But it's not sustainable to be so isolated. Even like you were saying, my daughter likes to, well, I have to unfortunately accept some things that I didn't accept before, and the computer is one of those things. But she doesn't have enough friends to kids to play with any longer either, because kids go to school. Kids in the family, exactly as you said, they think that, well, what can we do? They just live normally. All her friends, the parents of her friends that I was friends with, they don't talk to me because I remind them, exactly as you said, that we are in a way in danger, and they don't want to talk to me any longer. And since I'm isolated, there's also not some, like, when one is isolated, the topics to avoid COVID is also, like, in a way limited, right? Because our life is not a blast right now. We are not traveling, we are not experiencing, we don't. So of course you need people whom you can relax with, but like-minded, like you said, right? So you can express your thoughts simply. So it's very, very much welcome. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, we were struggling to work on the things that we work on day to day, because we kind of looked at each other and we said, well, like, who cares about, career success if this is going on? And I don't know, I can't predict, what will happen with the pandemic, but from what I've seen, people who are infected and reinfected 3, 4, 5 times generally don't fare very well. And I don't want to find out what that's like, because I said, yeah, and I'm sure you've said this too. Things aren't great now, but I can't imagine the pain of all the things that Andrew Ewing talked about yesterday. That can happen to you. Like, as you said, health. I mean, if you don't have your health, what do you have?
Exactly. So people say she will be affected because she's isolated. Yes, but hopefully it will be something that she will be able to get out of. But if her health is ruined already now, then it will not have a fix, simply. So of course there are some costs to the pandemic, but I'm trying, in my view, like you say, I'm also not a doctor. I'm very informed within the specialists with the WHN, but I mean that we are trying to simply choose the lesser evil in all this, right? But obviously it's not optimal. That everybody knows who has children, that they need to socialize, but also not at the cost of ruining the possibility of a normal future if they get really sick. And still, like Anthony is saying now, that we actually don't know, even if they are well after the infection, how it will affect in the future, maybe in a few or more years, right? We don't know that.
Right. Exactly.
Can I interrupt, because I'm doing a group like this since 2 years now, since August 2020, for all German-speaking people, like in safe circles and physical distancing. And I'm glad that now there's a bigger map existing, because I couldn't have done it with our webpage. I am no web designer. I try to connect people on our webpage too, but it's only for the German-speaking community, and it's not really flexible. But I have a Facebook group where now 200 members are, and we are focused also on the kids, and we are doing morning circles. They connect to each other, and now we are building up a group for creating something in the afternoon, and we do small circles like this. But it's very much you need very much motivation and energy to do it, because one has to start it, and hopefully others will come together and do it together. But it's very important to survive this time mentally, and that the children have social connections and don't feel alone.
Yeah.
And what I want to add, I always hide my group, because I was afraid of attacks in the public. I was once interviewed by a journalist, but I didn't say my name, because I was afraid of attacks, that they will come to my house, and also the administrators of my city will have an eye on me, that they say we treat not well our children, because we care for them. I mean, we care for our children, but we have to be very careful with this topic. Therefore, I also founded my group to say, when they ask what do they have for social contacts, what social contacts do your kids have? Then I can say, I have my network since 2 years now, and we know each other, and we are not alone. That's why I also do it, because I knew that this will happen. They will force us to go to school again and to kindergarten, because they say the kids are alone, and therefore these safe circles are very important, that we can stand against this narrative.
Yeah,
that we leave our children alone.
I agree.
Yes, and so I'm glad you're also from Swiss. I mean, you're not far away here. So we have the same idea, but in a bigger context, you are doing it. Maybe we can also connect on Facebook or something.
Yes, definitely.
Oh, yeah. You had a question. Kimberly, you can go ahead with your question.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Deb, I was just curious, when last we met, there had been roughly 300 users. I'm curious what, you touched on this a little bit before the meeting, but all of the marketing methods, because that's a pretty big jump, 200 more users just in a very short time. Can you divulge what the methods were?
Yes. So we're at 500 users now, as I said. And
that's great.
Really, the key is when someone talks about children, that's like the ultimate hook. And then, people say, and people, are throwing their hands up, right? And especially the people who are really interested in this, somehow all the parents who are concerned, they're all around in a circle of Anthony Leonardi, because he's the one who's saying, he wrote the letter saying, don't send your kids to school. There's a lot of neurological damage, and actually, I think Edie and Simone have probably alluded to this, that you're seeing early onset Alzheimer's. You're kind of seeing all these like really concerning problems that may occur in the future. And I think when you can kind of jump into those conversations and say, look, things are not hopeless. Here's a social network. If there's anyone in your community, sign up, join them. There are obvious features we need to build. For example, if you're in Boston and a new parent signs up, you get an email message, like an alert, right? That so-and-so is signed up, connect with them. So I think parents are just hurting a lot. So that's a really good hook to get people in. And the thing I'll say about growth, this is really sad, but I'm like optimistic that this social network is going to become way larger for a very simple reason. And that's just, there's more and more disabled among us, right? And it's a very simple, so the way it works is very simple. Either you are disabled yourself, or your friend or your cousin or your aunt or your uncle or someone who and I'll give you like a typical story. So like, there was a woman in Madrid who was sending her kids to school and it was completely fine and normal. And then her nephew ended up at the ICU with the Omicron variant. And as soon as that happened, it like clicks in you that like you stop believing like, oh, it's mild and it's fine, blah, blah. And then, you kind of, you see what happens to the child afterwards. And then suddenly what you thought was like, a bad allergy is now suddenly an intolerable risk for your 6-year-old and 8-year-old. And then you join the group of people who are like, no. Well, I'm not sending my children into this, right? I saw what happened to this child or to my friend or whatever. And so if you look at the growth rate of any of the Facebook long hauler, Twitter long hauler, groups, I mean, they're growing like wildfire. And frankly, this CovidMeetups.com just hasn't, I wouldn't say like, I've been the person who's been doing a lot of tweeting, and I certainly wouldn't say that this has been like an amazing marketing effort. It's just that the world's crying out for this.
Yeah, I noticed over the weekend you're very active in replying on Twitter. So yeah. I think it's fantastic that you engage so quickly with them. Yeah. Thank you.
I can really say that the social bit is almost the most important one, of course, apart from education, depending on the age. But when my daughter speaks to her friends, those days are great. She's happy, and she's happy with me. But when she's alone and when she feels isolated, it's terrible, because I feel really that I'm doing my best, but it's not good enough. And also her rage towards me, because she's big enough to, like, on one hand, she understands that I want well and that it exists. But on the other hand, if everybody she knows is doing the opposite, how can she? I mean, I'm telling her, you have a brave mom, at least. I stand for what I believe in. But, it's not worth anything to her if she's suffering because of it. So
yeah. My wife and I were talking about it this morning. It's like being in an abusive relationship, because you're being told everything's fine, everything's okay, there's nothing wrong, blah, blah, you're the problem, right? And then, if somebody tells you that 50 times, you start to believe it.
yeah. And my family, everybody who has had COVID, luckily for them, and I'm happy for them, everybody's fine. So, but it adds even more pressure on me that I'm the freak, because all of a sudden I don't want to go with the flow and think that everything is fine and take according to them, lesser risk of whatever damage. And one feels really, really very, yeah, it's really frustrating. And it's really, because everybody has, it's like we have our limits, right? And you cannot just pour out of nothing, and I'm pouring. But at some point, you just cannot go on like that alone, simply.
Yeah, I agree.
I think this really points to the importance of what this effort can do. And again, the more we can get it to the people who are interested in joining, the more value it will have for everyone.
Yeah.
And even as a mother, I think, like you said, not only with kids, but also for adults, because there are, like you were saying, with the people that have had COVID, you cannot just bang on them that, okay, the risk is huge, or no, maybe it's not huge, but there is a risk that this and this will happen to you. So there are lesser and lesser people we can actually be talking to about those things, like in the beginning of the pandemic, even in our group, right? Because almost nobody had it. And then more and more people. This is one. And second, like you said, people that are living a normal life, they don't agree, they don't understand, they don't want to listen. And obviously they don't support you because they have chosen a completely opposite path. So it's like really very difficult to have some kind of, and every human being needs to be understood, right? I mean, our basic needs, like I was telling you the other time in the meeting, our basic needs are not met. We are not understood. We have no support. We don't feel safe, like no connections. It's terrible, actually. I have never been in such a situation in my life before.
Eddie, yes, we hear you. It's a very shared experience among us. I'm going to move to some next questions. Wendy, and then Katie.
Yeah, I like this idea of possibly, I don't know, a language group. So would you like to speak in Spanish? Would you like to, because that's one of the things I like about the World Health Network, that, okay, we usually speak in English, but this idea of connecting people up from around the world, especially, in Sweden, I mean, I don't have any high risk groups here, some parent in-laws and stuff like that, but parents in Sweden are not even given the choice of allowing their kids to stay home and homeschool, because they actually have to be legally in school. Homeschooling is illegal here. This sort of things. So there's people, there's not only risk people as well. I think it's a brilliant idea. Love it.
Yes. So on languages, the application is set up to be able to add languages very quickly. So we received from you guys, the World Health Network, German translations, and that will be going live relatively soon. So I think what I might ask for help for is different, like if someone knows English and Swedish, there's not a lot of text to be able to, at a minimum, translate the whole app into the major European languages. And then, when you log on, there's no expectation to speak English because the app is already in French or German or Swedish. And we live in Europe, so we understand that certainly people don't really enjoy talking to their friends necessarily in English if they're more comfortable in another language.
No, thank you. Angelo had popped into the chat. He can give a hand with Italian next week, so that would be really helpful. Katie, did you have a question?
I did. I wanted to explore the idea of expanding. You know, we have a wonderful platform for families with children, but expanding into different groups. Like for myself, I'm an adult without kids. Like, what's the trajectory for that? What's, you know, what could we do to, you know, have that expansion?
Yeah, at a minimum, it's quite. So the plan today was essentially, so first of all, we need to change the homepage language. It's totally oriented towards families and children, and we need to make that a bit more inclusive, I think, for other groups. The other thing to do would be, so one of the features we'd like to add, I discussed this with Yanir, is saying in your profile, I'm open to an in-person meetup, I'm open to an online meetup, and sort of almost like a like a social dating site, if you will. You can kind of just go and chat to people who are in your local area. And I know that sounds silly, but the reality is that especially if you're clinically vulnerable or long hauler, people are nasty, right? People don't want to talk to you anymore because they see you. They're like, oh, you're like all diseased, and you remind me that we're in a pandemic, and I mean, it's sick, but it's just people are mean. And if we can kind of create an environment where it's like, look, it's okay to be a long hauler. Believe it or not, I could be a long hauler tomorrow. So it'd be crazy for me to discriminate against you because who knows, right? We're all in this pandemic together. So definitely for adults too who are isolated, I mean, it's painful, right, to face that kind of isolation.
Do you think it's they're being reminded about long haulers, or do you think they're actually doubting that these symptoms that they're all just hypochondriacs or a number of them?
I think it's all of. I think I mean I've heard of people who have been told that they're just being hysterical, and then it's really nasty towards women. I wouldn't call myself some kind of like raging feminist or anything, but it's just women are generally put down as being like overly hysterical, or I think multiple sclerosis used to be called like hysterical woman syndrome or something. I mean, it was like it had a ridiculous name in the past. And this is the same thing that's happening here, where you see with long COVID, it's mostly women who tend to get it, and they're just not being believed, and by their own family, by other women, right? So it's just, or their friends, and it's a combination of all of the above, where it's like, oh, you remind me that things are not perfect. Like my very fragile image of the world has been shattered because you're all sick, and I don't want to think about that.
Please continue to be a raging feminist, Deb, because it only means that you believe that women should have the same rights as men. So it's not that extreme, actually.
Can I ask a practical question?
Sure.
For the web page, you can sign in with Facebook. What does happen when I also sign in with the email? Is it double?
No, it's so this was people really didn't like the Facebook sign in, and I was actually going to talk about this. So
Yes.
The first thing that I didn't know is that people really don't like Facebook at all. So they're like, I don't care, I really need this, but I'm not going to sign in just because it's Facebook. Okay. And I think the other thing that people are not saying that it took me a while to understand this, is they really want to keep their Facebook life and then this life separate. It's almost like a secret society, as you said. So to answer your question, no, you can choose, hopefully that's clear, and I should really look at that, but you should be able to sign in. Yeah, so log in with, or sign in with Facebook, or sign in with email. And as I said, we just put that up today, and I don't think going forward many people will sign in with Facebook because they just don't like it. But if you sign in with email, it's the same thing. You need to add adding a profile picture. I haven't done that yet, so that's coming.
So if I logged in with Facebook, I can delete this because I also don't like it. And then I log in again with a new profile via email.
No problem. Yeah,
because
the funny thing
they
is,
will find out of my profile who I am and things like that. And
sure, no problem. Yes. Yeah, people really don't like Facebook. So
yeah, I'm wondering from Jennifer and Nicole, if you guys had a chance to look at it or share it with, I know you guys are very well networked with other parents groups, if you had any thoughts or feedback on it.
Well, I signed up myself, and so did Nicole. And I actually, during this meeting, I shared it into a virtual school group that I admin. So probably start looking for other groups to share with the admins that they can share it in there within Michigan. And yeah, we can share it within our groups. Is there any graphics to go along with it, to advertise it, that you would want us to share with it, to get it more visibility, et cetera, et cetera? Is there any like shareable content you want with the link?
Yeah, we actually, our communications team is working on that. We made some initial promotional graphics for this meeting, and we can just simply adjust those and make them more general. So yeah, we'll prioritize that over the next few days. It shouldn't take very much time. Yeah, that's a great request and a great idea. So thanks for sharing it with those groups, and we'll have to see, Deb, if the Michigan area gets if it gets a lot of action.
Yeah, Americans seem to get it very quickly.
Yeah.
And kind of what my wife and I were talking about this morning is I can really see in the US a combination of enough people signing up to this and like a couple of schools that are going to be, are going to go the extra mile for trying to be COVID safe, if you will. And it's really easy to imagine. It must be a combination of just a very large country. People are pretty spread out, so they're kind of looking for each other online. And Europeans tend to look to their government for help. I mean, as Simone said, like even here in Switzerland, you have to send your kids to school. It's not an option. Homeschooling is simply not allowed. And in the U.S., I mean, I'm Canadian myself. My sense was always that people looked at the government as dysfunctional. And we're like, oh, government, whatever. And then, you kind of like try and figure things out on your own. So this seems to really appeal to Americans. So and that doesn't shock me, given what I know about the US.
Angelo had a question, Deb. Are you on Slack?
I'm not. I was, but I can get back on Slack.
Okay, I'll send you an invite. Angelo might connect there.
Sure.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so as far as doing the changes for opening it up to folks that are single or married but without children, what's the timeline for that?
I mean, I think it would be pretty quick. So I think within about a week or so, we could kind of reorient the site to make it more obvious that this is open to really anyone. And as I said, it's definitely not just kids. Unfortunately, it's also the massive growth you see in the long hauler community that I would expect would be looking for help.
Yeah, and our communications team can also help. So we can follow up with you if that would be supportive, if you would like help with, I think you said you wanted to change the language of the front page. So yeah, we'd be more than happy to help with that.
Yeah, and I think what's amazing about WHN is you already have so many, well-networked people, with very large Twitter audiences and things like that. Is I think just with a few retweets from the World Health Network, if we can get like Eric Michael Ding or Yanir himself, people who have large audiences, I think you would see a lot of interest and people would share it because people are likely to know someone who's looking for something like this, if not themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're recently networked with the People CDC, which is starting up here in the U.S. So we're very well networked, and it'll be a great resource. We're so happy.
Yeah, my wife and I are not. So frankly, we don't really know anyone. So we just thought that I'm confident that if we build this, that there'll be a group of people who will be very interested in this. So.
Have you made your thoughts up about safety? What will happen when someone is not really like us and is using it, and people are a bit afraid? Germans, they always talk about safety first.
Yeah.
If you log in and there are no true profiles and they connect, and can they report it to you or to the admins if something happens?
That's a really good point. So this is actually originally why we had it with Facebook sign-in only, because Facebook enforces a real names policy, and you can sort of go after someone if they have a Facebook account. When you open it up with email, you don't really have that choice. So today, the way with safety is that it's not really you're not allowed to send back and forth messages. So you can only send one message to the other party. And then, and this will change. And, the idea initially was to kind of push the conversation into WhatsApp or, Telegram or Facebook or some other platform. And it's really just like a kind of the first message service. But you're right that if people start sending messages back and forth, and certainly when they start meeting up in real life, you need to be really careful that, are you actually talking to a mother with 2 children, or are you talking to like a kidnapper, right? And in these situations, yes, we need to build out kind of a report to admin type or block this user features like that. But generally speaking, when it comes to a social network, you do have to be a little careful, especially if you end up meeting in real life that, this is really who they say it is. And, I would certainly suggest at a minimum doing a Zoom call or something before meeting them.
Do you have anything like that on the page? Just kind of best practices if you're meeting up, just like some safety guidelines?
No, but that's a really good idea. We should probably put something on there.
And our contacts are not visible, right? The email or whatever we put to register, no. Okay.
Not even your last name. So it's the photo that you provide, and then your first name, and then your last initial. And I think we even wrote, don't put, when you place the marker to find other people, don't put it specifically. So if you're in like Madrid, just drop it in the middle of Madrid, not your specific address.
Okay, thanks for the answer.
Yeah, is there like a report feature?
Yeah, we need to build that. No, there isn't. I mean, Emily built this in a week, so
no, it's okay. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, we didn't get this though.
I know. Now you're crowdsourcing. Now we're doing a crowdsource of all of the safety protocols. So
no, but these are good points.
I think we're doing a great brainstorming here.
That's a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now we're here. Now we're here to help too. So.
Great.
Yeah, we'll make a list of these things. Great.
I mean, people are asking for safe doctors already because they are afraid to go to these areas all the time. Yes. But now it's more dangerous because many doctors don't care, and they didn't care before. But now when measures are open, they're opening up, and everything will be leisure. And we are looking for safe doctors. Where can we go? People are asking this on Twitter and asked me also, especially on my profile. I couldn't answer something. We have to make lists, but you cannot do it in the public because doctors are attacked. They are attacked. They cannot give their real names, but people are asking for this service too. I just want to mention it.
No, it's a great idea. And this is kind of what I was saying in the beginning of the call, that having businesses that sign up and say, again, this would be self-reported in the beginning, that, we wear N95 masks, we have a HEPA filter, we have a CO2 monitor, things like that would make a huge difference. Today, I read about a really interesting hairdresser in Ireland, where I think it was 1 day a week, they take measures, and then on the other days of the week, they don't. And the plan was to try to get people who are concerned about, getting their haircut safely organized. And as you said, what's really crazy about this is that they can't do this 5-7 days a week because they get attacked, right? Because, you come in for your haircut and you're like, well, why are you wearing masks, right? So it's like, well, what's the problem here? But maybe every Wednesday, you take measures. So things like that. I mean, this is how people are adjusting. It's nuts, but it would help to have a directory online for these services. As I said, the point here is to try to make you socially richer. Unfortunately, the site cannot hand out money to you, but at least it can, connect you to the right people and services.
And also a question, I see now registering that you can choose only one country because it's about physical, like in-person meetups, right?
Yeah.
But since sometimes it's not only about that, maybe because the distance still might be too big, would it be possible to be able to choose more countries than one? I mean, then not for physical meetups, obviously, but to be able to socialize them. Mm-hmm.
It's true. No, I think we need to add that. that like basically if you're available to a virtual meetup, then you can just
because then we open also the space wider, right? Because we can, as long as you know the language, you can talk to so many people, and of course you can put it or make it clear where you are so that people can meet up with you if they want in person. But also the other part is, I think, also necessary. Well, welcome, right? Maybe not necessary.
Definitely.
Well, thank you so much, Deb. We have time for maybe another question, but we're about to wrap up here. So thanks for your time, and thanks for thinking of this and putting this together with Emily. And give our thanks to Emily. I'm sorry that she couldn't come, but of course we understand it's bedtime.
The question is Emily fallen asleep or the 3-year-old?
It's a good question. Yeah.
Well,
so we're excited to promote this. Enir, do you have any final comments?
No, I think that, again, I think one of the key challenges that we've faced has been the visibility within the community. And I think this is a tremendous opportunity for us to connect with others that are concerned but are not finding the opportunity and the means to do so, and to connect with others and really alleviate many of the stresses that are present in the community as well. Thank you very much.
Can I ask a last question to Deb? Because now we had an opportunity to talk with a journalist about our situation, and I'm a bit shy, but would you do it if a journalist is asking you? Would you talk about these networks, or would you still hide it a bit? Because I had the possibility now, but I am not sure what to do if I should take it.
No, I mean, I'm happy to talk about it because, at the end of the day, we've decided the Western world to leave behind disabled people. I mean, I'm not disabled myself. I'm not clinically vulnerable, but I mean, I'm not some sort of hero, but somebody needs to speak up, right, and say that, look, okay, you can move on, but for other people, this is, even if it's not a death sentence, I mean, you're sentencing them to a lot of pain and suffering. And we need to remember that these people exist. And by the way, in all of our societies, we've already voted on things like disability rights, right? So you're not allowed to exclude disabled people from school, from the office, and now we've gone back to the 1700s in our values. Okay, fine. Like we're all very weak individually. Like what can I do, right? Myself, nothing. But we need to remember that these people exist. And someone needs to speak out and say, look, this is the minimum we can do. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to say that. And then once you phrase it, from that perspective, I mean, it's difficult to argue, right? Like what do you expect a disabled person to do for someone who's clinically vulnerable? I mean, there's not much they can do.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming along, and I'll follow up with you via email just to connect with I think along some of these
great
questions. Yeah. So thanks again, and thanks everyone for coming and joining us today.
Thank you so much, Deb.
Yeah, thank you.
No
Yes, thank you, Deb.
No problem.